It was a sticky Tuesday morning in late August when Marcus Hayes, the newly appointed chief of police, stepped out of his truck onto the cracked asphalt of a precinct parking lot nestled in the foothills outside Reno, Nevada. He wore a faded flannel shirt, well-worn jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days, an outfit chosen deliberately to throw off any assumptions. Marcus had spent over 20 years in law enforcement, but this was no ordinary first day. As a black man tasked with cleaning up a department riddled with rumors of misconduct, he knew the only way to see the truth was to witness it raw, before the smiles, before the masks went up. So he kept his arrival quiet, blending in as just another face, just another man. The precinct buzzed with morning energy, officers coming and going, swapping casual jokes, glancing at him but not really seeing him. Perfect. He adjusted the brim of his cap and took a slow breath, the weight of what lay ahead pressing hard against his chest. Inside, the office felt stale, fluorescent lights flickering above glossy tile floors, the smell of burnt coffee thick in the air. Marcus moved unnoticed past desks where small clusters of officers laughed, worked, or scrolled their phones. It was near the break room when it happened. "Hey, you!" A sharp voice cut through the room. Marcus turned and saw a white officer, name tag reading Daniels, approach with a crooked grin, his tone thick with arrogance. "You lost? This ain't a shelter?" Daniels sneered, stepping closer as a few others looked on, some smirking. "You need to take that mess somewhere else." Marcus stood still, the insult hitting like a slap. He opened his mouth to respond, but Daniels wasn't finished. "Didn't you hear me? Get out. We don't need people like you hanging around." Laughter rippled behind him. Marcus clenched his jaw, his pulse climbing, but he said nothing. Daniels leaned in. Then, without warning, he spit. Hot saliva hit Marcus square in the face. The room roared. One cop slammed a hand against the table. Another chuckled about showing the strays their place. Marcus didn't flinch. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his cheek slowly, each motion precise. "That how you treat everyone who walks in here?" he asked, voice steady as stone. Daniels sneered. "Only the ones who don't belong." More laughter. Without another word, Marcus turned and walked away. Down the corridor, a loud crackle burst from the intercom. All personnel to the briefing room. The timing was perfect. The room was already filling up when Marcus entered through a side door, this time carrying a Navy folder embossed with the precinct's seal. The same officers who had laughed stood around, sipping coffee and trading grins. Daniels leaned smugly against the wall, clearly satisfied with his performance. At the front of the room, Captain Wallace, a stocky man with a graying mustache, stepped forward and called the room to order. "Listen up, everyone. Today's the day we meet our new chief," he announced. The chatter quieted. Curious eyes turned to the front. A few faces still wore the residue of laughter from earlier. Daniels smirked. Marcus stepped into view. The room froze. Silence dropped like a curtain as realization washed over them. "I'm Chief Marcus Hayes," he said evenly, "and I've seen enough." It was a sticky summer morning when Marcus Hayes, the newly appointed chief of police, stepped into the precinct building on the outskirts of Fairview, Tennessee. Dressed in a faded flannel shirt, worn-in jeans, and dusty sneakers, he looked nothing like a man who had spent 20 years navigating the ranks of law enforcement. But that was by design. Marcus had no intention of being welcomed with applause and pageantry. He wanted the raw, unfiltered truth. As a black man taking over a precinct long rumored to be riddled with misconduct, He understood that real insight came not from press briefings but from silence and observation. Inside, the office buzzed with everyday noise, phones ringing, banter floating over half-empty coffee cups, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Nobody gave him a second look. That changed when he passed near the break room. "Hey, you!" barked a voice. Marcus turned to see a white officer swaggering toward him, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. The nameplate read Officer Collins. Behind him, a few others watched with the detached amusement of men who thought they owned the place. "You lost, man? This ain't a shelter," Collins sneered, his tone soaked in mockery. "Take that mess somewhere else." Marcus held his ground, caught between speaking up and letting the moment play out. Collins didn't wait. He stepped closer, voice rising to entertain his audience. "You deaf?" I said. "Get out of here. We don't need your kind hanging around." The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel. Then, without warning, Collins leaned in and spat in Marcus's face. Time stopped. The room faded as warm spit ran down his cheek. Marcus didn't flinch. He calmly reached into his pocket, pulled out a cloth, and wiped himself clean. "Is that how you treat everyone who walks through those doors?" he asked quietly. "Only the ones who don't belong." Collins shot back with a snort to another round of chuckles. Marcus said nothing. Instead, he turned and walked away, letting the moment hang in the air like smoke. Minutes later, the intercom crackled, calling all personnel to the briefing room. As the room filled with officers clutching mugs and murmuring over inside jokes, Marcus slipped in from a side entrance, now holding a folder stamped with the department's seal. He waited in the shadows while Captain Doyle, a burly man with a gravelly voice, called the room to order. "We've got an important introduction today," he announced. Collins leaned back against the wall, still smug. "I'd like to present our new chief of police," Doyle continued. And then Marcus stepped forward. The shift was instant. Silence slammed down like a hammer. His measured steps, his steady eyes, they froze every breath in the room. He laid the folder on the lectern and scanned the crowd. Collins turned pale. The others looked back and forth in disbelief, some whispering, others dead still. "Good morning," Marcus began, voice calm. "I'm Marcus Hayes. As of today, I'm your new chief." The silence was electric. Collins went rigid, his face flushing deep red. Marcus let his eyes lock onto him, just a beat longer than necessary before addressing the room. "I came in plain clothes this morning because I wanted to see this department without the performance. What I saw," he paused, letting the tension build, "was eye-opening." A few murmurs stirred, but he raised a hand and they stopped cold. "In just one morning, I've seen behavior that doesn't just violate professionalism, it betrays it. The culture that's taken root here ends today." The room was stone still. "Respect isn't optional," Marcus said, stepping closer. "It's the foundation of our work. Without it, we don't just fail each other. We fail this community." He paused, letting the truth hang in the air like a verdict. "Some of you thought I was just another man to be put in his place. But let me remind you, every single person who walks through those doors deserves respect, badge or not." Eyes dropped, mouths tightened. Collins visibly squirmed, sweat gathering at his temple. "Change is hard," Marcus continued. "But make no mistake, there will be no room for behavior that strips anyone of their dignity." He stepped down from the podium and walked slowly, purposefully, until he stood just a few feet from Collins. "Officer Collins," he said, his voice low but sharp, "you represent everything that's broken in this place. When you spit in my face, You didn't just disrespect me. You disgraced the badge, the oath, and every citizen we serve." Collins stammered, "Chief, I didn't know." "That's the problem," Marcus snapped. "You didn't care to know. You saw a man and decided he didn't matter, and that assumption, that blindness, is why this department has lost its way." Nobody moved. "What happened this morning wasn't one man's mistake," Marcus said, addressing the whole room now. "It was the result of a culture that celebrates bullying and prejudice. That culture ends now." He returned to the lectern, voice rising with resolve. "I've spent my life fighting for justice, not just out there but in places like this. Change won't be easy, but it starts today. As long as I'm chief, this precinct will stand for integrity, respect, and accountability." He gave a firm nod to Captain Doyle. "Effective immediately. Officer Collins is suspended pending an internal investigation. And for those of you who think this is just a warning, think again. This is the first of many changes." A few audible gasps rippled through the room. Collins flushed crimson, shrinking under the weight of every eye on him. Marcus remained composed. "This isn't about punishment," he finished. "It's about setting a standard. If you can't rise to it, this isn't the place for you." He scanned the room one last time, locking eyes with every officer in the room. "If you're ready to do better, to be better, we move forward together," he said, each word measured but unwavering. "But make no mistake, I'll hold you accountable every step of the way." The meeting ended in a heavy silence, the kind that sticks to the walls. Officers filed out without their usual banter, their steps subdued, conversations hushed. At the podium, Mitchell stood a moment longer, watching as Officer Daniels pushed through the exit, his face flushed with a cocktail of shame and fury. The others averted their eyes, some wearing guilt, others quietly reflecting. Back in his office, Mitchell sank into his chair, exhaling deeply. He knew what he'd walked into. Years of deep-rooted behavior wouldn't unravel overnight, and for some, maybe not at all. But he hadn't taken the job in Maple Hill to make friends. He'd come to rebuild something broken. The phone rang. It was Captain Moore. "Chief," Moore said, voice careful, "you handled that better than most would have." "Thanks, Captain," Mitchell replied, "but the real work starts now. I want everything on Daniels, complaints, reports, anything we've got, on my desk tomorrow." "You got it," Moore answered, then paused. "And, Chief, I think you rattled a few cages today, in a good way." Mitchell ended the call and allowed himself a fleeting moment of satisfaction before diving into a mountain of overdue paperwork. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. The station didn't feel the same. The laughter that once followed Daniels now turned to silence when he walked past. Word of his suspension traveled fast, sparking quiet conversations in corners. Mitchell made a point to be visible. Walking the halls, greeting every officer, his presence wasn't just symbolic, it was a warning and a promise. One afternoon, Officer Lauren Reyes, a rookie with sharp instincts, approached him. Her voice trembled slightly. "I stayed quiet before because I was scared," she admitted. "But I want to do better, Chief." Mitchell nodded. "That's all I ask," he said gently. "It starts with you." Not everyone, though, shared that resolve. Daniels filed an appeal, crying foul over what he called unfair treatment. Mitchell didn't budge. The internal review exposed a trail of past complaints, excessive force, crude remarks, unchecked aggression. The appeal was denied. Mitchell's message rang clear. Accountability wasn't a slogan, it was policy now. Even as momentum built, resistance lingered. Discussions around bias and community trust didn't always land well, but Mitchell pressed on. Every small victory mattered. A recruit speaking up, a veteran changing tactics. One bright Saturday, he attended a local outreach event. A young boy, maybe 7, approached timidly. "Are you really the chief?" he asked, eyes wide. Mitchell knelt to his level. "I am." The boy hesitated. "My dad says cops don't care about people like us." The words hit hard. Mitchell looked him in the eye. "I can't change what happened before, but I promise we're trying to do better. And if you ever need help, you come find me. Okay?" The boy smiled just a little and nodded. It was that moment, the smallest moment, that reminded Mitchell why he'd taken this fight. By the end of his first year, the station wasn't perfect, but it was different. The holdouts, the ones unwilling to change, were gone, replaced by officers who believed in something more. And the community? Still cautious, but they were watching, listening, hoping. Mitchell stood in the main hallway one evening, watching his team file out. There was laughter now, but it felt honest. No cheap jabs, no cold shoulders, just people slowly becoming a team again. He knew the battle wasn't over, but for the first time he felt it deep down. Change was coming. Hard-earned, long overdue, but real.